You'll never guess where the heroes of this manga end up, and what a person is willing to do when they need money badly. The events begin at a construction site on an ordinary workday. A drill got stuck in the clay at the bottom of a pit, and the foreman offered a reward of 20,000 to whoever could retrieve it. It was a dangerous job that could even cost someone their life. Nevertheless, a hand rose from the crowd. A young man expressed his desire to try, since he had already done a similar job before. The foreman was scared that the man might die and tried to talk him out of it. But the man, who was only concerned about the reward, was not hesitant at all. The young man didn't respond over the radio for a long time, as it was out of order. The other workers were nervous, but the young man emerged from the muddy water, having completed the job and collected the reward. His name was Xiao Bei. He was 18 years old, and he was a partially employed worker. He worked hard to earn money for his sister's medical treatment. He was ready to do anything for her. He was willing to take risks every day, as long as it paid off. Blood was streaming from his nose, and he wiped it off his face. That's when he stumbled upon a stranger wearing a hood, cap, and mask. The stranger asked him if it was worth risking his life for such a small reward. "If it weren't for my need, no one would do such a thing," Xiao Bei replied. "I have an interesting offer for you," the stranger said. "If you're really that brave, it's perfect for you. Do you want to try it?" The stranger had a strange bracelet on his hand that glimmered. Xiao Bei thought the stranger was a con artist and refused, then went to the hospital to see his sister. Sometimes he went hungry to save money, but he bought her favorite treat on the way. In the corridor, he wanted to ask the doctor about his sister's condition, but the doctor looked at his dirty and ragged clothes with disgust and only said that he hadn't paid the bill for this month. If he didn't pay soon, his sister wouldn't receive treatment. He also said that Xiao Bei's sister, condition was deteriorating, and she urgently needed a kidney transplant. Based on his financial situation, he should be prepared for the worst. Xiao Bei promised to get the money, but the doctor didn't believe he could come up with the hundreds of thousands needed for the operation. The stranger was eavesdropping from around the corner. Xiao Bei sat by his sister's bedside and wondered where he could get the money. His sister was unconscious. Xiao Bei called his father. His father immediately said he had no money, and even if Xiaoxi received treatment, there was no guarantee she would recover. It seemed his father was a despicable person who had already mentally buried Xiaoxi. Xiao Bei was infuriated by his father's words and how he had never cared for them. He saw the stranger by the window. It was the same guy he had seen at the construction site. "Are you following me? And why are you hiding your face?" Xiao Bei asked, threatening to call the police. "You're mistaken," the stranger began. "Well, because I want to play a game with you." The stranger offered to be caught within 5 minutes. If Xiao Bei succeeded, he would receive 100,000. Xiao Bei didn't believe him at first. The logo on the stranger's clothing looked very familiar. The stranger snapped his fingers and announced that 20,000 was already in Xiao Bei's account. If Xiao Bei caught him, he would receive the remaining amount. Xiao Bei reached for his phone in amazement and saw that the stranger wasn't lying. 20,000 was indeed in his account. But how did the stranger know his account number? "Who are you? How did you get my account number? And what will happen if I refuse?" Xiao Bei asked. "Even if you refuse, the money will remain with you," replied the stranger. Xiao Bei found all of this strange, but the conditions seemed attractive, so he accepted the game. Now he had 5 minutes to catch the stranger, who had already jumped out of the window. It was astonishing that after such a high jump, he was unharmed. Xiao Bei swiftly sprinted down the stairs after him. Time was ticking. Upon reaching the street, he saw a silhouette around the corner. The stranger was too far away. Xiao Bei knew this route well since he visited his sister every day and decided to take a shortcut. More than a minute had passed. The young man skillfully leaped over obstacles but was still far ahead, 3 minutes behind. The chase continued. He was getting closer. Xiao Bei, panting heavily, was closing in on the fugitive, who was picking up speed. The young man hadn't anticipated it would be this challenging. His strength was already waning, but they seemed acquainted as if fatigue hadn't affected them at all. The 5th minute was approaching, and if things continued like this, he wouldn't be able to catch him. He needed to come up with something, and he resorted to a desperate measure. He climbed onto the roof, realizing that to catch the stranger, he would have to jump from such a height, and he had to jump accurately to land right on the stranger. But one mistake could cost him his life. There were only 5 seconds left. There wouldn't be another chance. And for the sake of his sister, he decided to take the leap. Screaming, he flew through each floor. 3 seconds left. The stranger thought he had won, disappointed that he had apparently misjudged the young man. The last second, and just a moment before time ran out, he finally grabbed the stranger, who was no longer expecting it. "Caught you!" Xiaobei exclaimed joyfully. He could finally catch his breath. The promised money was deposited into his account. The stranger congratulated him on his win and offered more money, promising even bigger prizes for future games. Without asking questions, Xiaobei agreed to continue. He had literally handed his life over to the stranger as he dreamed of his sister's recovery. The stranger was pleased. Robotic eyes shone beneath the mask. Immediately, the stranger placed a metallic bracelet on Xiaobei's hand, which began to scan information. "Player confirmed," a message displayed. Xiaobei started losing consciousness and shut down. After some time, when he woke up and opened his eyes, he saw lifeless bodies lying around him, suggesting they had been there for quite a while. There was also a timer that showed 5 minutes. "Survive for 5 minutes," the message read. Suddenly, 2 unfamiliar beings appeared. They had childlike bodies but monstrous faces with red eyes that were even on their foreheads, along with frightening fangs and claws. "The game begins! Player, get ready!" the message declared. The countdown to the start had begun. His head was pounding as he tried to remember what had happened and how he ended up in this place. The last thing he remembered was the bracelet fastening on his wrist, and then he passed out. Monsters were already gnawing on corpses and were ready to attack their new victim. 2 seconds before the start, he was trying to understand what was happening. The game had begun. The monsters immediately launched an attack. He knew what was going on, but he also knew that if he was caught by these monsters, it would be the end for him. His survival instinct kicked in, and he started running. He wanted to first survey the area where he was. He only needed to hold out for 5 minutes, but right now, that time seemed like an eternity. As he was surveying the area, one of the monsters disappeared from view. Somehow the monster ended up in front of him, and with a swift movement, it ripped a piece of flesh from his shoulder. The claws and fangs were so sharp that they pierced his body like a knife through butter. The monster's actions were synchronized. They were like 2 hunters, and the guy didn't know how to act. Due to nerves and fear, his strength quickly left him, and it wasn't even halfway through the time. One monster threw the other aside, and the other quickly plunged its claws into the player's back. It was already ready to sink its teeth into his body, but with a sharp movement of his arm, Xiaobi threw the monster off. The wounds hurt terribly, and exhaustion was taking its toll, but he wasn't going to give up. About 2 minutes passed. The monsters again rushed at the guy. One of them managed to grab Xiaobi by the arm and with one movement broke one finger and almost tore off the other. It was clearly painful and scary, but the poor guy didn't want to die. The bracelet flashed a warning that his heart rate had reached 180 beats per minute, then 190, and it kept rising. When his pulse reached 200 beats per minute, he felt like he couldn't breathe. There was only 1 minute left until the end of the game. Xiaobi remembered his sister, and that kept him from giving up. Xiaobi saw a notification that the pulse had reached 200 beats, which gave him access to the system. Of course, he didn't understand what system was being referred to. Immediately, a message appeared saying that the skill of backtime flow had been activated. The body had completely regenerated. The new skill allowed him to see 3 seconds into the future when his pulse was at 200. The cooldown time was 10 minutes. Xiaobi had no choice but to agree to the system's suggestion to use the skill, which was supposed to make it easier to complete the mission. There were 30 seconds left until the end of the game. With the help of the skill, Xiaobi saw the trajectory of the monsters attacking him and embedding themselves in his body. It was amazing. Now he knew exactly how to dodge that attack. There were only 20 seconds left. The monsters were almost at their target. Xiaobi swiftly dodged the attack. and the monsters flew past him. There were only 10 seconds left. The creatures continued their attempts to kill him. The guy tried to use the skill again, but it had a 10-minute cooldown time. In confusion, he waited for the end of the time. One of the monster's claws was almost at his face. Less than a second until the end of the time. It was all over. The guy managed to survive. If time had not run out, our player would most likely have died. He had many questions in his head. The system announced that the player was rewarded with 300 points. He still didn't understand what this was for, or why he needed it. Ahead was some kind of room where it seemed like there were people who survived the test. Each person had the same bracelet on their hand. This bracelet contained personal information, points, tasks, and so on. Any player who violated the rules would be immediately destroyed. The people in the room looked gloomy, exhausted, and frightened. Today, 20 people entered the game, but there weren't that many people in the room anymore, as everyone else had perished. It was interesting to find out who these people were. One of the individuals in the room grabbed the newcomer's shoulder and started a brief conversation. He introduced himself as Zhang Ye. He arrived here half a month ago. He was just like Xiaobi, a player. And so were all the others in this room. Xiaobi began to inquire about what this place was. "This place is an arena for a survival game," started the new acquaintance. "Do you know about the Age Association?" Xiaobi had never been interested in such things since he had to work hard to make a living. Zhang Ye explained that Age was a global company with a budget that could buy half the world. Rumor had it that their development of artificial intelligence had advanced far ahead. Xiaobi remembered seeing the logo of this company on the stranger's clothing. Zhang Ye showed him how to use the bracelet. By tapping on the notification, a hologram from the bracelet greeted him and said that, like everyone else, Xiaobi had to survive here. The conditions for survival in the arena involved continuous participation in games, accumulating points for upgrades. Only one survivor would be able to claim the grand prize. The main rule was that if a player surrendered, they would be executed on the spot. Therefore, they had to accumulate enough points to aim for the grand prize. The detailed rules could be found in the beginner's guide. What the exact prize was remained unknown. Could it be a substantial amount of money? No one knew. It was clear, however, that reaching the final stage was extremely difficult. The game had 7 levels, with the lowest being Child. To claim the grand prize, one had to constantly play, earn points, and level up. The higher the level, the more challenging the games became. Accumulating points was not easy. They were considered equivalent to money here, even used to purchase food. Additionally, the number of daily purchases was limited. One had to fight for it. The most important thing was to ensure that one's points didn't run out. If the points ran out, one would slowly die. Although the reward was tempting, the rules were very cruel, and after all, Xiaobi was currently alone in the hospital. Was it possible to leave this place? And then one of the players snapped. In a fit of hysteria, he tried to tear off his bracelet. Warnings in the bracelet urged the player to calm down, but he didn't calm down, and it tore him to pieces. That's what happens if you try to escape. Accept the rules or die. The boy realized that he couldn't escape from here. It takes a great deal of mental fortitude to survive here. Xiaobi didn't understand why his new acquaintance was telling him all of this. What was in it for him? Zhang Ye simply replied that he wanted to stick close to strong people. He said he had observed Xiaobi's first game, seeing how weak he started, but quickly dodged attacks toward the end. But if time hadn't run out, the final attack from that monster would have killed Xiaobi. "It's thanks to the strange system that I survived," Xiaobi responded, and asked about the skills, but Zhang Ye seemed to not understand what he was talking about. "He witnessed my game, but doesn't know about the existence of the system," Xiaobi thought. "Does this mean that I'm the only one to whom it is accessible?" Just in case he shouldn't mention it. The loudspeaker announced that the public area would close in 30 minutes, and everyone needed to return to their rooms before closing, as violators would be executed. The common room was accessible every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Zhang Ye offered to take the newcomer to his prison cell, and they walked down the corridor. Xiaobi wanted to know more about how to survive in the arena. Jiang Ye was surprised by the newcomer's calmness, considering it took him until 3 p.m. to come to terms with his fate. As it turned out, the guys would be living in rooms opposite each other. There were 5 minutes left until closing, and the boys went to their rooms. Thanks to his new acquaintance, Xiaobi quickly adapted to the new place, but it was still difficult for him to accept that he would be living here. The prison cell already had several people in it. All the spots were taken, and the locals pointed him to a place near the toilet. Everyone went to sleep, but Xiaobi couldn't sleep because he was worried about his sister. He decided to start by studying the rules of this place and entered the guide for newcomers. The familiar hologram greeted him again and began to explain. After the first game, points start accumulating. Exactly at midnight every day, 100 points will be deducted automatically. If there are no points left in the account, the player will die instantly. Your current level is Child. By accumulating 10,000 points, you can raise your level to Explorer. 10,000 points, and today he only earned 300. Also, 100 points will be deducted today. You will encounter different monsters in the arena, which has 3 difficulty levels: Novice, Intermediate, and Advanced. The duration of the trial, the location, and the number of participants will vary depending on the difficulty. The number of points obtained will also differ depending on the difficulty. Every day, you must participate in at least one game, otherwise the player will be executed. Alternatively, you can pay 500 points to avoid this rule for a day. It was hard to imagine that the player would have to fight those monsters every day. Xiaobi understood that he needed to participate much more actively in this. A new message appeared, which read, "To become stronger, you need to undergo training." The system provided limited-time access to daily training sessions to increase the player's level, for which points were also awarded. Xiaobi was happy that he could level up and earn points through training. Accepting the offer to train, he found himself in a white room. The system informed him that upon successful completion of the training, the player's skills would improve, but for each loss, 100 points would be deducted. In training mode, monsters couldn't inflict real damage. Xiaobi wasn't entirely ready to face those monsters again in the middle of the night. Morning came, and Jiang Ye came to Xiaobi's prison cell, but he wasn't there. Did he already start the trial? Could he have died already? But then he saw Xiaobi coming towards him. They had only known each other for a day, but Jiang Ye was glad to see him. "You started the trial too early," Jiang Ye said, but Xiaobi wanted to settle in as quickly as possible. He just wanted to train before the trial, even though he knew the monsters in training weren't real. It was still as frightening as the first trial. It seemed like those creatures were faster than last time, and they caught up to him. He lost 100 points, but the system opened up basic training for him to improve his physical condition, so he could stand up stronger through practice. In this mode, he learned jumps, somersaults, and flips. The trials were challenging, but after numerous mistakes, he managed to acquire those skills. Although he spent a long time in training mode, in reality, only a second had passed. These training sessions were truly useful. "Stop dreaming already," Jiang Ye said. "Come on, I'll show you everything." "Are we only allowed one game per day?" Xiaobi asked. "Can I play more?" Jiang Ye was shocked because the difficulty of a repeated game would increase. Spending energy on one game and then attempting it again at a higher difficulty level would be suicidal. Only a few people did that and managed to survive. But Xiaobi wasn't afraid. He already possessed some skills and believed that point accumulation was too slow and the daily fee was expensive, so he wanted to try it. Jiang Ye thought surviving one game was already lucky and was amazed at how Xiaobi dared to repeat it twice in one day. But Xiaobi was determined to go through the trial. The system reminded him that the trial would be at a higher difficulty level. "Do you wish to start?" it asked. "The trial will begin as soon as you enter the room." The corridor was filled with maimed players, everything covered in blood. Moans of pain echoed from everywhere. But the boy believed that after his training, he was capable of facing this trial. Therefore, he wasn't as afraid of the increased difficulty level. He wanted to earn more points, so he had to give it a try. The player entered the room. To his surprise, the arena was completely different. It consisted of a massive pool with small bridges. The same two monsters were present in the room, but the task was more challenging. He had to not only survive for 5 minutes, but also kill at least one monster. The task seemed incredibly difficult. To make matters worse, it turned out that the pool wasn't filled with water. It was filled with sulfuric acid. The game began, and the countdown started while the monsters launched their attack. The monsters this time were even faster and looked slightly different. The boy couldn't dodge the first attack in time. With all his strength, he started running. The bridges were very narrow, and one wrong step could cost him his life. The trial proved to be incredibly difficult. Xiaobi had nowhere to run, leaving him with only the option of jumping over the sulfuric acid pool. He jumped, and...
Want to know what happens to our heroes next? Then subscribe to our channel, like and write your thoughts in the comments, and we will definitely make a sequel. Thanks for watching, and see you in a bit.